All right. Welcome everyone to our second week of the bootcamp. Hope you're all doing well, making progress on your projects. I just have a few announcements before I hand it off to our great speaker today. First of all, I put in the Slack channels the quick labs credits that I was able to secure through Google. So work with your team coaches to come up with a list. There's a catalog in there. Just give your coach the full name of the course that you want to take, name, email, and so forth. And then I'll be able to assign you credits. I think with the credits that we have, you probably can take 2 to 3 classes. It's all cloud training. It's free cloud training for you. So if you want to take advantage of those courses, there are tons of great courses. Let's take advantage of them. Otherwise, those credits will expire next year. So I want to make sure that this quarter bootcamp students and next quarter bootcamp students can take advantage of those. Another thing that I added today to the portal is a PDF of actually Gartner's research toolkit. It's for upskilling resources that's available to all students. I mentioned before that you have access to Gartner, and actually Erin, our speaker today, is from Gartner. She's going to tell you a little bit about Gartner. It's a fantastic resource. I use it all the time. UCLA has free access, through just single sign-on. So take advantage of it. It's a great resource for all kinds of technology trends, topics. You can do searches, you can save it to the library. I mean, there's tons of them. So go through that PDF and just take advantage of those resources that are available to you. Another thing is Slack communication. I'm not seeing a lot of traffic in Slack compared to the other boot camps. So I don't know if you're not using Slack or communicating elsewhere, but I highly recommend that you use Slack. I post things in there. Recently we created a jobs channel, and I just half an hour ago, I posted an opportunity, an internship opportunity at Salesforce. So please take advantage and communicate through Slack for your project. And also I posted the recording from last session. It's on the portal, and I'm going to be posting tomorrow the orientation recording. I just got that edited, so I'll post that tomorrow as well. Okay. All right. So today our topic is Intro to Design Thinking. We use design thinking in our bootcamp, but this is we wanted to introduce more detail to the concept. From the survey last quarter, there was feedback that students were not familiar with the framework. So we have a great speaker today, Erin Griffin from Gartner. She's gonna present Intro to Design Thinking. She's a UCLA alum, and she has spoken at our events before. And so, Erin, it's all yours. You have shared access, so you can share your slides.
Great. Hi, everybody. I am going to be speaking fairly quickly today because we've got a lot of material to cover in a short period of time. And I want to warn you that there will be some level of group participation. So I have a one activity that I want you to do. I am very accustomed to being interrupted. That was years as a mother, but for a lot of other reasons as well. So please don't hesitate if you have a question, and I'll ask Rafi if people are asking things in the chat and you want to stop me and say, hold it, people want more here. Sure. If I could ask you to handle that for me.
Sure.
Okay, so yes, I'm a UCLA alum, very proudly so, and enjoyed basketball this year. Mm-hmm. I work for Gartner. My job is to help clients with their mission critical priorities. I'm many years in the world of technology, served as a CIO in many different industries. So now this is my give back job when I get to help other people as well. We're going to get right into it. I'm going to answer 3 questions today, 2.5 actually. I'm going to talk about what design thinking is. I'm going to talk about how you do it. and how do you get started? I think I don't have to worry about the getting started part because I think you guys are going to be knee deep in design thinking. And so I'll be leaving it to your coaches to help you advance your skills. But let's talk about what design thinking is. So there's this guy named Tim Brown, and he's like the father of design thinking. He founded a company called Ideation, which is sort of one of the best known companies to deploy design thinking as a tool for problem solving. And he said design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements of business success. So here's what that looks like. What do people want? That's first and foremost. That is the most critical part of this whole equation. What do people want? Then you have to think about what is feasible to provide to them. What can you create? What can you afford? What is possible to do? And then viable. Is it, I think I'm talking to somebody who works in IT for, heads up IT for Virgin Galactic, right? I think if, a few years ago, if you'd said, oh yeah, well, we're going to send people on trips to the moon, just casual travelers, we would have thought that was crazy and not financially viable and not technically feasible. But we're now starting to understand that it is. And in fact, I have a friend who has a ticket for the first flight. So if it ever gets off the ground, she'll be on it. Okay, so these are three key elements. In the Venn diagram of things, the sweet spot in the middle is where you want to operate. So I want to talk about the concept of tacit knowledge. And the best way that I can explain this would be to ask you to explain to me how to ride a bike. And whenever I ask this in a group where we're interactive, and I'm going to have to go through too much for us to do a lot of interactivity, but invariably the description goes something like this. Well, you put your leg over the bar, and then you sit on a seat, and then you pedal. And then I say, cool, but you must fall over because do you have nothing to hold on to? Oh, well, you hold on to the steering, the handlebars. Oh, do you just hold them? Well, no, you go like this with them, right? So people can't tell you, they can't verbalize much of what they understand completely and intuitively. And that is a key part of why design thinking is important, because design thinking is focused on observation in order to understand what people are really looking for. And you'll find this if you work in IT and you want to develop a tool, a piece of software, an application, and you ask, well, what are your requirements? And they will tell you, and you'll come back and hand them back exactly what they described, and they'll say, that's not what I wanted at all, because they don't have the way to verbalize it. So this is a huge tool to use in information technology, software development. It's critical to use the concepts that we're going to learn about around empathy. So here's the premise. If I focus on people, I observe them in context, I can figure out what they want. I watch what they're doing. I watch why they're doing it. I look at what they're trying to accomplish. And I look at what the sort of ecosystem around which they're operating is. So I'm learning about what they're doing and why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and what they expect as a result. Okay, so we have 6 mindsets. When you think about design thinking, these elements are part of how you do it. The first one is empathy. And I will tell you over and over again, this is the most important element of design thinking. Nothing is more important than empathy. So if you walk away with nothing today, remember this. It is the only way that you can create a solution that solves a problem that a person really needs. So get into people's heads, watch them, understand them, connect with them so that you know what they really need. Show, don't tell. Design thinking, that's where kind of the design word comes in. It's a lot of drawing, a lot of building little models, a lot of prototyping. It's all about showing people what your idea is rather than trying to tell them. It's about experience. It's about process. One of the things that I think we all get excited about design thinking, we think, oh, it's just about ideas. Let's come think up some ideas. No, there's a process to it, and you need to follow the process. It's very action-oriented. You're doing all the time. And finally, it's highly, highly collaborative. So it's relying on you working as a team in order to be effective. Okay, that's what design thinking is. So how do you do it? Design thinking has 5 stages. Now, you will see this is the Stanford D-School model that is also the IDEO model. If you look at the top, Google likes to have kind of this 3 E's model of empathy, expansive thinking, and experimentation. It's all the same words or different words for the same concepts. So there are, I'm gonna move this over here. Oh, so there are 5 stages. The first stage is the empathize stage. This is where you figure out what your people are doing. You're watching them, observing them in context, talking to them, interviewing them. This is where you do things like focus groups or ride-alongs or that type of thing. Defining, you then take all the stuff that you learned and you start to unpack it and see if you can figure out where the needs and the challenges are. Then you move into ideation. And ideation is one box here, but it's actually 2 very different elements. There's the element of divergent thinking and the element of converging ideas. We'll talk about that. Prototyping, that's where you take all these ideas and you build out something that looks like the idea. Whether that's, something made with marshmallows and toothpicks, or whether it's a working prototype from a prototyping tool, or anything in between. What you're doing is getting the idea out there tangibly. And finally, testing it, sharing it, getting people to work with it, getting input so that when it's all said and done, you can go back and redo it because it will never be good the first time. So that's the 5 stages of design thinking. And now we're going to go through them. Empathy. Okay, so there are a few ways that we do exercises around empathy. A big way is through interviews. So we sit people down, we ask them to just talk. We like open-ended questions. We ask why a lot. We use observation to see their body language. You know, where are they anxious? Where are they excited? Where do they lean in? Where do they get shy? We use strong interview techniques to make sure that we're getting as much clear input as we can. And then observations. So people tell you what they want, and then you go and actually watch what they do. You're looking for things like routine. You're looking for how does somebody actually use something rather than the way that perhaps it was designed to be used. How does it fit into their life? How many times have you seen or heard someone who has an object around their house, and the object is not at all what it was designed. It's used for something completely different. That happens a lot. That means there's a gap. You know, there's a need that isn't being fulfilled. So watch what they're doing. Don't worry about being quantitative. You should count how many times they do X. A great one is obviously when you're doing an observation on someone who's using an application, and you count how many clicks it takes to get to a certain outcome, right? So observation is probably the better of the two. And then focus groups and surveys and all other means of collecting information about your customer. Okay, but who is your customer? This is a very key part, is you really need to understand who the customer is that you're solving a problem for. You need to know who they are. You need to know what their area of responsibility is or what their area of focus is. A persona is an amalgam of a lot of different people who kind of fit the same category. So as an example, I am an executive partner. That's my job title. I'm also a female executive partner. That makes me one of a lot fewer people. And because I'm a female executive partner, I might have different needs than my male colleagues around whatever. And so you might make a persona about Erin, the executive partner. Create a name for me, maybe you call it Emily, and you take my colleague Gail and my colleague Cindy and myself, and you start to look at our patterns and our needs. And based on that, you come up with a persona. So it's not Erin, and it's not an average, it's not a demographic or a marketing group. It's really a data-driven description of a kind of person who is your customer. And depending on what you're working on, you may want to capture different information. So if it's for a work colleague or a work situation, you might want to understand what tools they have to use at work, what their responsibilities are. If it's something for their personal life, you might focus more on their family, their living environment, where they shop. They should have a name for the sole purpose of having you believe and begin to feel that you are working with that person. So here's an example. And we're going to move through a little example around Average Airlines in a minute. So this is our persona for Average Airlines. Now here's Emily. Emily is a mother, a wife, a daughter, a friend, a successful professional. She's 35. She's an operations manager for a utility company. She's got a master's degree. She travels for business. She only does carry-on luggage. She travels by herself. She's very technologically comfortable. Okay, all of these things are important to the airline company's understanding of their customer, because they want to create an environment that works for Emily. So this is the persona. This persona is derived from the observations that were made, the interviews that were done, the surveys that were taken, etc. And that they compile that into thinking about Emily. So the next step is you capture your observations in a tool. So there are several tools that you can use for doing this. A popular one is a journey map. You can also do empathy maps, and there are others. But we'll talk for a minute today about a journey map. So we put I'm losing my words today. I just learned from New York yesterday. I'm still a little jet lagged, but so we put together this concept of average airlines and Emily, who's a traveler. And so now we want to look at what happens when Emily tries to board the plane. So we look at the journey that she takes from the time she arrives at the boarding gate until she sits in her seat. And when we do a journey map, we break down the process from the customer's eyes into several steps. And then we look at each of those steps. And for each step, we say, okay, what is she expecting to have happen here? And then, okay, what is she thinking about it? And then we say, how is she feeling about it? And what is she interacting with? So let's walk down this exercise for a minute. Emily arrives at the gate. What is she expecting? Well, she's expecting there'll be a lot of people. What is she thinking? Maybe she's thinking, I hope everybody has a mask on. What is she interacting with? Well, the seating in the room, potentially the gate agent, looking at the schedule monitors. So those are all touch points for her at this stage of her journey. Then she finds a seat. She's expecting that there may be a seat left that she can have. She's thinking it's so crowded, maybe it would have been better to stand. Then her touch points are the seating and potentially power outlets in the seating. So without reading the whole rest of this to you, because you're going to do an exercise about it in a minute, I will tell you that the rest of the steps are that she lines up and shows her boarding pass. Then she enters the plane and finds her seat. She stows her luggage in the overhead compartment, and then she settles in to her seat. So those are the stages of the journey from the time she arrives at the gate until she's buckled in. Now, do you see that this feeling line is blank? The feeling line is blank because you're going to fill it in. The reason that we are doing this is that we want to understand from Emily's eyes, how is this experience for her? And where is she unhappy or uncomfortable or delighted or frustrated? Because that's what we're going to fix. What we want is to create an experience for Emily that is seamless, no friction, easy to experience. And so what I'm going to ask of you is to get the feeling. So I think based on, because I don't know the logistics of you guys, the way you're organized your teams, I think it's best if we, everybody comes up with their own ideas and then we'll discuss them as a group. So you saw the journey map of the boarding experience, and I will put it back on the screen in a minute. What I want you to do is thinking about your understanding of Emily, thinking about her persona, and look at the journey map. And for every cell in that feeling row, I want you to come up with some possible feelings she may have based on the other information that was in the map, okay? And then after you come up with a couple of ideas, what I'd like is for everybody to sort of come off mute and let's have a discussion about it. What I want to understand is, at the end of the day, if you were going to do something to fix the boarding experience, where would you focus your effort? Okay, so going back here, look at each of these stages and think to yourself, what might she be feeling? And there may be other things she's thinking too, and you're welcome to sort of go deeper into her head. But what is she feeling at each stage? And I'll go back one slide for a second to remind you who she is. Remember that she travels by herself, that she only carries on her luggage. She's very tech savvy. She's traveling for business. she's got kids at home, and she's busy. Okay? And she smiles too, which is good. So if there are no overarching questions, let's give you guys 3 or 4 minutes to think about how Emily would be feeling at each stage of this process. Okay, 1 more minute of brilliant ideas. And then, as you can probably tell, I'm going to ask you guys to come off mute, share your thinking, and we'll capture some of it on the screen. Okay, so Rafi, can you help me by encouraging or prodding the students to speak up or call on them? And let's start with, what is Emily feeling when she arrives at the gate? She encounters a crowd of people. She's thinking, I hope everyone's wearing a mask. What is she feeling right now?
I suggest that instead of chat, please just speak up and just, okay,
Yeah.
We have a couple of hands. So Mira, you want to go first?
She's probably feeling nervous.
Great. Others?
I would say worried because she doesn't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Olivia?
I would say overwhelmed because the fact that there's a huge crowd sounds really overwhelming, and not knowing if they're going to wear a mask or not.
Mm-hmm.
There's also stress in the chat.
I just wanted to say that I can add probably focused on top of worried, because since she's at the she's at the gate, she would have to figure out what to do next and stuff like that. So focused.
Great. Okay, so now she's hoping there's a seat, and then she's thinking, maybe, I don't know, should I sit down? How's she feeling now?
Katerina?
Probably overwhelmed. In her profile, it mentions that she constantly feels stressed and like she's running out of time. So when she needs to figure out all of this, probably overwhelmed.
Great.
It seems like she'd be frustrated with the seating situation. There aren't enough seats for everyone.
probably also just like physically and mentally tired, given the context of her being constantly short on time and energy.
Yeah, very much so. She's probably going, I'm tired, but I don't want to sit down. Okay, great. So now it's time to line up and show your boarding pass. So what is she feeling at this point?
Probably hoping that everyone doesn't just rush to get their boarding pass checked in and create like a mess and a jam.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Maybe a little confused because she's not sure if they're going to take her device or not.
I was gonna say she might feel anxious too because she might not want to hand her device to the agent kind of during COVID times because she also only carries on her bag as well. So she seems like only to be wanting to be with her stuff.
Right, great. Okay, now she walks down the jetway and she gets on the plane and she is thinking, oh my gosh, this person next to me is not wearing a mask.
I would be annoyed.
Annoyed? Mm-hmm. Good one.
I'd also be worried because like since she has kids too, right? She'd be worried about the safety of her and her kids.
Upset or angry?
Uncomfortable probably would be a good option to put in.
Unconscionable, is that what you said?
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah,
She would
bad connection here.
Also to add, like I think she would also be a little bit I think this is like a little bit coincides with like the annoyed angry part, but she would try to like avoid any sort of quarantining after, because I think you mentioned that she's going for like business trips. So in regards to like business meetings and such, you probably don't want to catch COVID or be in any sort of scenario in which you would have to be quarantined for 14 days. That would potentially block some meetings.
Good one. Yep. Okay, so now she's on the plane and now she has to put her bag in the overhead and she looks and there's already something there.
Probably just more stress. That's kind of her thing thus far. She's just a little anxious because of the whole situation. So it's kind of, I guess, amalgamating for her over time. Like each new thing gives her like another layer of stress. So.
Yeah, accumulating.
At this point, I would just be disappointed because it was so many stressing and being overwhelmed that at that point it's just like throwing the towel.
Irritated probably as well.
Perhaps she's unsurprised because usually all these airlines always overbook their flights. So what's new?
Yeah. Disappointed?
Yes, definitely disappointed.
Okay, and she settles into her seat. And the power outlet works. How's she feeling?
I would say that she's relieved because like in her profile, it mentions it seems like she relies a lot on technology like iPhone, laptop. So to have the power outlet working is something that she probably needed.
Yeah, good one.
Although maybe like another, like a devil's advocate of that is it's such a small bonus compared to a lot of negatives for her. So it could just only slightly just change her, give her something to do on the flight, I guess. But then she maybe wouldn't be able to focus because of all the other stuff.
Yeah, she's probably frustrated about the overall like experience so far, but at least is relieved by this minuscule, I don't know, something that benefits her, I guess.
So I have to tell you guys that I do this exercise a lot with people. And it's part of a broader exercise where you guys think about all of these things. You don't just think about this one line. But I think I mentioned to you that yesterday I flew back from New York, and it's the first time I've been on a plane since COVID, and I travel extensively for my job, so it's been pretty much of a shock. And I am, I had all of these feelings and experiences, except the power outlet did not work. So I was really feeling my inner empathy for Emily today. Okay, great. So given that, you looked at all these things, she's not a particularly happy person right now. I mean, she's nervous, she's stressed. All of these things are not a lot of positive emotion going on. What would you start to think is a good problem to try to solve here? Which of these areas do you think you would focus your attention on?
I guess the first thing would probably be the crowds and the lack of masks, just because it's also, other than just being an annoyance, it's also like a public safety and health issue.
And as someone else pointed out, by the time you get down here, there's a lot of accumulated stress, right? So possibly solving a problem earlier on in the process could enhance her experience going forward. Maybe relieving the stress at the beginning. I will say that pre-COVID, almost everybody talks about stowing the overhead luggage. Because with all the annoyance, the biggest annoyance is you can't get your bag up there. But I think the world is different now. So I think you may well be right. Does anybody else have a thought about, is there a better stage or a different stage that they would also consider?
I would probably, oh, sorry, you go ahead, George.
Oh, no, please.
I was just gonna add getting her luggage back, because if she had to like check in her bag because of lack of space, the waiting time in the baggage claim or like in the the bags are delivered are gonna like take more of her time, especially if she's in a business trip, which is supposed to not take that long.
Yeah, and she's trying to get home.
Exactly.
Was there George that was going to speak?
Yeah, I was going to throw out finding a seat, because I think in my experience flying, that's always my first point of contact with the actual airline. Before then, you know, the crowd of people can't really do anything without that. And that's just people being people. But it's just like, oh, they didn't put enough seats in the boarding area. Like that, now I'm starting to blame the airline. And then everything after that, I'm starting to attribute to the airline.
That's a really good point too. So, okay, so we've got a couple of different places. What you would do as a team is focus on one. And you probably have a discussion like this. And then in the final analysis, we'd say, well, we can't solve everybody's problems all the time. We're going to focus on this one first. And we won't worry about which one it is, because you did a great job. So the next thing that happens is you define the problem. And the primary way that we think about defining the problem is through the creation of a problem statement. The problem statement basically takes the insights that you uncovered through evaluating through the persona, the observations, the interviews, and the customer journey map. And you say, oh, okay, here's the problem. Now here's an example that is a very general problem statement about her boarding experience. As a busy executive and mom, Emily deserves a quick and stress-free boarding experience. That is the ideal state, because she has a lot of work to do and wants to use her energy and her time wisely and reserve her energy for her family. That is why you need to solve this problem. And because the cost is when the boarding process is complicated, she ends up feeling tired and anxious, has an unproductive and unpleasant flight. And what does that mean to the airline? She's going to switch airlines. So you write a problem statement, and then you break the problem statement down. So looking at the journey map, you think, well, what are some ways we can improve the process? So how might we reduce the amount of carry-on luggage that's brought on board? How might we increase the size of the overhead bins? How might we provide dedicated overhead bins, right? If it's about the seats, how might we expand the seating in the gate area? How might we dedicate seats in the gate area? Maybe you come up with a plan where people pay to have a seat in the gate area. But what you want to do is take the problem and break it into different ways of solving it. And that's the how might we statement. Okay, so you've got problem statement, you've got a how might we. How might we is derived from the problem statement. Okay, now the part everybody likes. Now you get to come up with ideas. So in ideation, this is the time when we focus on getting ideas. And as I mentioned, there's two parts to the process. There is the divergent thinking part and the convergent thinking part. And if you think of it like a funnel, you put all kind of crazy ideas, and the more, the better. This is truly a situation where quantity is important and quality is not. Don't care. Stupid ideas are as good as great ideas, but you just start throwing out ideas. And there are lots of different ways that you can do this that are structured and fun to help you think more creatively. And then you converge. You start to qualify all of these ideas around different criteria. And so that's where you converge and reduce the number of ideas that you're going to take on. So for ideas, you know, you need to have fresh thinking. And there are a lot of different ways that you can clear your mind and freshen up your head before you start to brainstorm or do brainwriting or any of these brain idea generation techniques. And the first one, the easiest one, is 5 whys. So you keep asking why. So in Emily's situation, why are there not enough seats in the boarding area? Well, because the boarding area is small. Why is the boarding area small? Because we have 10 gates in this section, and so the size is limited. Okay, so now you know that you're dealing with size limitations. You may not have to go through 5 times of asking the question why until you hit the problem that you can solve. 100 questions. You write down 10 questions that you can think of. Questions like, why doesn't Emily have a smaller bag? Why are there so many people at the gate area at the same time? And you write down a bunch of whys, and then you hand them off and somebody else adds to your list and you add to their list. Or you think about kid questions. What would a child ask if you told them this problem? You think about, what is the worst possible way to solve this problem? How can we make it better? So you're freeing up your thought process to get away from your traditional thinking and start to think wild and crazy. Now, after you've gone through the ideation process, now it's time to converge. And you have to be religious about making sure that you don't do these things together, right? When someone comes up with the idea that you know, the best way to ensure a good boarding process is to drug everyone and drag them onto the plane, you don't say that's a bad idea. That idea goes in the idea funnel with every other idea. Then you get to this point where you say, okay, how feasible is it really to drug everybody before they go on a plane? Well, it's probably not very feasible because I don't think a lot of people take the drugs. It is original, but we're going to categorize that in maybe the how bucket. So what I want to show you here is what's called a how, wow, now. And it's a really popular, easy way to converge ideas. You basically take all the ideas that you've generated through an ideation session, and you say, okay, this idea, is it really creative and new and different? Well, yes, it is. Is it highly feasible, or would it be really hard to implement? Well, it'd be hard to implement, but it's a super great idea. Okay, that goes in the how bucket. Got another idea, amazing, clever, creative solution. How feasible is it? Well, it's actually really easy to do. Okay, let's put it in the wow. What about, it's not that original, but we could do it instantly. Do it now then. And if it's not very original and it's not very feasible, say goodbye. Those ideas you don't want to worry about. So this is how you take all those wild and crazy ideas and start to filter them down into things that you want to take action on. And then you take action. So this piece is the stage where you build a prototype and you test it. And I'm combining prototyping and testing mostly for time, because we're, as I told you, we have to power through this. But basically, a prototype is a tangible representation of your idea. You don't want to tell people what your idea is. You want to show people what your idea is. So if you look here, you've got somebody made something with pipe cleaners and stickies, I think, over on a piece of cardboard. Somebody else has a model that is built somewhat out of Legos. Down at the bottom, you've got just drawings, people drawing out what screens might look like on a mobile app. So it's not about making a work of art. It's about communicating your idea visually so that people can understand it in their own terms. So you build with the user in mind, right? This is focus on Emily in this instance, focus on your persona, focus on the problem statement and the how might we that you're working on, and then try it. Just put something out there and see what it looks like, and then test it. So how do you test a non-working prototype, or how do you test a Lego drawing or Lego creation, I should say? Well, you sit down with all your Emilys and you say, this is my idea. Tell me about this. And they try to describe it to you. And then you start a conversation. Well, how would you use this? Well, what would be hard about it? And get feedback. And when you make a prototype, you have to get feedback because, as I mentioned, it's not going to be right. So don't even think it's going to be, because if you do, you will lead yourself astray. You're going to make a prototype. It's going to be a step in the right direction. You're going to get feedback on it. You're going to go back to the drawing board, make some adjustments, and bring it out for more feedback. So as you're doing this, each time, each iteration, your prototype is getting better. It's getting closer to what the user wants, and you're capturing feedback and improving your work. Finally, you're going to have something that's actually testable, a working prototype. And that's where you're getting close to finish. So where do you begin? Well, I think, as I understood from Rafi, you guys kind of already been working in design thinking, or it is will become part of your curriculum and your approach. So you have the advantage of being able to start now. What I want to do, however, because I actually did get through this in short order, is to spend a few minutes listening to you guys, hearing your questions, and seeing if there are areas where we could make this conversation more clear, if you have specific questions, if you want to go back to any part of it. So I think we have a few extra minutes, right, Rafi? I've got until 7:30.
We have a couple of minutes because the teams are gonna, want to work with their coaches on their project. So maybe 2 or 3 questions, if any of you students have questions for Erin. No questions? I guess no questions.
No questions. Great.
Yeah.
I must have been thorough.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much, Erin. This was wonderful. It was educational for me as well. So it was really awesome presentation, and I love the slide deck. So it's very, very practical and tangible. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, and it was great talking with you guys. Good luck in your studies and your projects.
Thanks a lot, Erin. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.